That is so fascinating, that piece right there, from how this really practical thing, like intolerance to diesel fuel, just sort of dashed your chosen career path, and then you go
Yeah.
and find something completely different that you later pursue. This was going to be my next question. How did you transition from marine biology to cancer prevention? Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of times I have been fortunate in a sense that I was prepared to take up opportunities when they presented themselves. And I think that's sort of one of the things I keep telling my students as well as a professor. It's not that we can necessarily plan our trajectory, but if we are open to other possibilities and if we sort of take opportunities and say yes when the opportunity presents itself, then we can actually sort of change very easily.
Hello, I'm Anna Dimichik. This is Laws of Achievement, and talking to me today is Petra Akiko Tsuji. In the real world, she goes by Peko.
In the
Um,
real world.
in the real world, yes. Peko is a professor and chair of the Department of Biological Sciences of a university in Maryland. Peko has some very impressive educational background that I don't want to butcher, so I'm going to let her talk about it herself. Hi, Peko.
Hi, Anna, how are you?
I'm well. Long time no see.
I know it's been a while. It's been since 20 years or something like that. It seems like it.
No, we met in Maryland in 2018, actually.
You're right.
Remember?
You're right.
But that was very
Yes.
brief. That was very
Okay.
brief.
Educational background is
Yeah.
interesting. It's varied. So, as you know, I was born and raised in Germany,
Hmm.
and I actually have a degree in biology already from Germany. Now, that was primarily in zoology, and I really thought I was going to become a zoologist and do all the big things. And when I came to the US in the mid 90s or so, I ended up working in the state park and I actually used my zoology degree for a little while, but this was in Charleston, South Carolina, which is also where we met. And if you remember the beautiful area of Charleston, there's so much natural resources, there's so much oceanographic, marine biology opportunities. And so I really wanted to sort of fulfill my childhood dream and become a marine biologist. And I did exactly that. And so I decided to become a marine biologist and went to the, I think it's called the Christ Marine Lab, so the marine biology program at the Charleston, I have to think for a second. Hold on. So it's the marine biology program at the College of Charleston, which is part of the university there at the in Charleston, South Carolina. But what's interesting is that I love marine biology, and I thought I was going to pursue that for a really long time. And I loved fishing and diving, but I don't do so well with diesel fumes. And in order to go out to the areas to do the fishing and diving, I get violently ill with diesel fumes. And I should have known that because the same thing happens when I'm behind a school bus. But so either going to be a lab technician or working in sort of the fishery sciences, but removed from the fishing and diving, or do something else. And so that's when I decided to explore other options, and I became aware of the marine no, it's called the marine MBES, Marine Biology and Environmental Sciences program at the Medical University of South Carolina. And it's really a molecular biology program, but it's focusing sort of on marine and environmental issues. And so next thing you know is I'm starting a PhD program. And so that's where sort of the trajectory shifted a little bit, because as part of that, even though we use marine models in environmental issues and marine biology issues, I really focused more sort of on the molecular sciences in terms of nutrition and cancer prevention using marine models. It sounds counterintuitive, but instead of using mice, instead of using rats, I used fish models to explore how some of the nutrients that we actually ingest as humans might actually help in terms of preventing cancer in the long run. And so that sort of shifted my trajectory towards more molecular biology, which I then pursued, and that's what I still do today.
That is so fascinating, that piece right there, from how this really practical thing, like intolerance to diesel fuel, just sort of dashed your chosen career path, and then you go
Yeah.
and find something completely different that you later pursue. This was going to be my next question. How did you transition from marine biology to cancer prevention? Yeah, right.
Yeah. I think a lot of times I have been fortunate in a sense that I was prepared to take up opportunities when they presented themselves. And I think that's sort of one of the things I keep telling my students as well as a professor. It's not that we can necessarily plan our trajectory, But if we are open to other possibilities, and if we sort of take opportunities and say yes when the opportunity presents itself, then we can actually sort of change very easily. And so even though it seems like I'm doing something completely different now, I still think my background in zoology, marine biology helps me really approach some of the problems I'm facing now in terms of research questions in a fresh way, in a novel way, in a new way. And it's helped me tremendously. So I was a little sad to not go fishing and diving on a regular basis, but I think it's been a good change. And most of us in the sciences know how important change is and the ability to really sort of embrace those changes.
Absolutely. Okay, so now you're actually in the leadership role, leadership and management role, right, in your university. Can you talk a little bit about that, like how the transition from science into management happens, and how do you find it? And also maybe what do you think are the strengths of your position and of the American academia, and what are the challenges that you're facing?
How much time do you have?
I have a lot.
Okay, so department chair is a little bit different in that it is still part of the regular faculty. So unlike being an associate dean or the dean of a college or a true administrator, I still teach, even though at a smaller level, at a more reduced level. I still do research, even though even that has a little bit less time now. But it's an additional service role. I get a teaching reduction, so I only teach one class a semester rather than two or three. I don't spend all my time in the research lab anymore, so I have a smaller lab. But at the same time, I'm still part of the regular faculty, right? So that's a small distinction. It's not truly administration only, but what is new is I get now to hire new faculty. I get to hire staff. I get to supervise staff. I get to help with the professional development of my staff, the faculty. And to me, it was the perfect opportunity at the time. So I've done this position now for almost exactly 1 year, right? And what happened is typically when we hire new department chairs, quite often there's either a big election or maybe there's even a recruitment where we invite people from the outside to apply for these positions. Our college consists of 5 departments. We have biology, chemistry, computer science, physics, and math. And so in these 5 departments, we had 5 different department chairs. 4 department chairs at the same time transitioned. And so there was this big opportunity, a big push where there were internal candidates were being strongly encouraged to step up. And I thought this might be an opportunity because I'm now at an age where I thought, if I don't do this now, I might never get to try this. And I thought this would be just great because I really love teaching and helping the next generation of scientists. And I thought as department chair, I might have an opportunity to help the other professors then help mentor and push the next generation of scientists further. And so in a way, it was sort of a way to reach out more and have a big impact. So I thought that was just an awesome opportunity. And it's been challenging, I'm not gonna lie, right? I mean, it's not easy because all of a sudden I have so many conversations. Any problem, any issue that is in the department comes to me.
Right.
But at the same time, it's been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. So part of me wants to say, why haven't I tried this earlier? But the other part says, I think now was the right time to try this. I'm really glad I did. What were the other questions you had?
Yeah, you just never know how it's going to work out for you because I see similar dynamics happening in my law firm, right? I have some lawyers who are amazing lawyers, and some of them want to try themselves in the management role, and
Yeah.
it doesn't really work for them. They don't like it. They don't like that component of solving all of the purely technical problems, right? And others take to it very naturally, and they're just
Yeah.
good and they love it, and like, why did I not do this before? I guess my other question was more broader in the sense of things in academia. How do you find it? What are the strengths? What are the challenges?
Hmm.
What would you change? What would you change if you could? Right? What are you working on changing?
It's a little bit of a challenging question for me because other than when I was in my early 20s when I was working for State Park, I've been in academia for a really long time, either as a graduate student or then now as a faculty member. So I don't really have a ton of experience in the private sector at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
I do have some experience in sort of other state agencies like the state park or the Department of Natural Resources where I did some of my graduate work. But other than that, I think the challenge, let's say the benefits are that the people I work with have a passion that is, I think, unparalleled. I mean, all of us come together because we like students and we like to mentor the next generation of whatever they are, scientists, medical professionals, teachers, whatever they want to become. And so I think I would like to say that most of us, at least in the sciences, don't go in there for the money. It's just not a place to get rich unless you are maybe in the college of business or something like that. But at the same time, I think it is really rewarding, and it's nice to see that we have a work-life balance that we can help create. It can be really challenging in the beginning, I think, to really recognize how much control we have over that. And especially, I'm sure you remember how the process works. We come in as untenured, basically as faculty on probation for the first 5 years. In those 5 years, we have to demonstrate that we are good at scholarship, good at teaching, and good at service. And to be honest, most people, even no matter how good they are at service and teaching, it's the scholarship, the number of publications, the number of research grants we bring that really sort of makes the difference. And so it's really challenging the first 5 years to really figure out how much effort, how much time, how much mental and physical energy goes into that versus your personal life. But I think once you are then tenured and once we are in that process where we have a little bit more security and can sort of think outside our respective boxes, it's a really cool, not just a lifestyle, it's a really cool area to be in because we have the flexibility to really tailor somebody else's professional development in a certain way. And there are opportunities, for example, to go into more administrative positions if you want to. And so I don't think that shift is as easy to do in other places like in the private industry. I encourage those who thrive in those environments to pursue that. But it's not for everybody. And we do see that sometimes where some people don't like those particular instances where we get student emails 24/7, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's funny how many of our students think that what did you do last summer? How was your break? And I go, break?
What break?
What break? Because in the summers when we do most of our research, right? And so it's actually kind of interesting that transition right there between the semester and then the summer and back to the semester.
Are you expected to respond to those emails immediately, or are you okay like responding the next business day?
So our rules typically are we try to respond within 2 business days, but chances are most of the faculty actually screen their emails to make sure there aren't any true emergencies on a regular basis. And I'm talking like once or twice a day. And especially as the chair of a department, similar, right? So there's not a weekend where I go by and it's like, just to make sure there isn't something that's truly burning. Because if there's a student in crisis or faculty in crisis, that can't wait 2 business days.
Right.
That needs immediate attention, that we do that.
Got it. Right. No, I can see that. Yeah. I mean, you're paying your dues for the first few years. And then once you're done paying your dues, you're transitioning into a much nicer lifestyle where you get to have work-life balance and you're surrounded by intellectually curious people, right? All of them very passionate about the area of expertise. Yeah, no, I can see how it's really nice.
I'm sure it's not quite different from being in a law firm, right? Where you start out sort of as the junior person and then have to pay your dues and move up maybe eventually. And then, I don't know, have your own law firm eventually?
Actually, no, it's often the opposite.
Really?
Yeah, no, absolutely, because actually, lawyers, I believe, are among the top 5 professions in the United States and Canada, where the more successful and experienced lawyers are becoming, the more likely they are to suffer from major anxiety and depression, precisely because there is a lot more pressure. The stakes are so much higher. You're always being, I guess, ambushed by from all sides, from clients who did not get the outcome they wanted to maybe the bar. There are always audits, always all kinds of um, things that add pressure essentially. And when you're a junior, your level of you're working a lot, a lot of hours, but your level of pressure and level of responsibility is lower. But as you progress, the level of responsibility just goes way up. And no, you don't get work-life balance, not much of that. It's like I do a lot of jail visits on the weekends and holidays, for example. So, I mean, you can
Wow.
arrange once in a while where you have a weekend where it's covered, but when your clients need you, you have to be there right away, or your colleague needs to be there right away. So, no, it's really the opposite, I would say, at least for now. But it's all fun because I very much enjoy what I do, you
And you
know,
get to help people.
and I get to help people, and I get
Yeah.
to sometimes stop something bad from developing. So I could actually save people a lot of trouble down the road if I'm there
You're
when they
kind of
need
like a
me.
department chair.
Something like that. Department chair.
Yeah.
Great. So let's go back a little bit. I want to ask you how you became so interested in biology, because it seems like you were interested in it from a very young age, right?
I was. So in Germany, we have sort of the equivalent of AP classes. And I was in AP biology, AP English major, if that makes any sense. And so I always found it fascinating. But interesting enough, I wanted to become a diplomat. I wanted to travel the world. I wanted to go to law school. I went to law school in Germany for a year. But I think that was in part because I loved the idea of being a diplomat. I loved the idea of being involved in that. And plus, it didn't hurt that my boyfriend at the time was in law school. So that's sort of right. So now law school in Germany back in the 1990s it's not the same as in America. So if people hear that, they may think that, oh my gosh, you got into law school. It's like, no, 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 no. Anybody can go to law school in Germany. Basically, you apply and you got in because we had a group of maybe 300, 400 students admitted, and it wasn't a really high bar. But I think I learned very quickly that the type of studying required for law school is not what I like. There was no hands-on. It was all reading books and reading case studies. You know that. You went to law school, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But there was also not a whole lot of accountability for me, because basically the way the classes were set up is, here's the class, come to a lecture if you want to. You don't have to if you don't want to. I'll see you at the bar exam in 2 years. And that didn't work for me. I actually needed a bit more structure and maybe not pressure, but more guidance. And so I thought, this isn't working for me, because I ended up a whole lot more time in the cafe next door to the classroom than the actual classroom itself. And I thought what I actually really enjoyed back in high school really was biology. And that's what I applied to the biology program. It's stuck ever since.
And it worked from there on.
And it worked from there. And I think the ability to sort of solve scientific puzzles, like to answer questions, really is sort of what really stuck with me. I enjoyed still thinking about law school and making arguments and whatnot, but I think I could do it on the science side now. It works in.
What about your research in intestinal microbiome?
So my actual research has to do with colon cancer and prevention of colon cancer. Most of the research activities we actually do in my research lab currently have to do with foods or food products or items that we extract from foods to see how our signaling inside our colon, in our intestines, changes because of it. There's lots of molecular biology. But here's the thing. Our intestinal system, our GI tract, is not just human cells. It has a ton of bacteria in there as well. And that's particularly what we call the intestinal microbiome, right? Mm-hmm. And this is a pretty new thing. And when I first started my research on that, we didn't really consider that. And so it's interesting now to sort of to also assess the interaction between the human cells and bacterial cells. And we do some of that in my research lab. But here's the fun part. So we have a couple of, remember when I talked about many different ways to get to an answer or to a problem? We have some side projects. And the intestinal microbiome we currently are investigating are, I kid you not, polar bears, elephants, horses, right? Because there's very little known about them. And the microbiome is pretty easy to assess by using poop samples,
right?
Fecal samples. So we realize this is technically the fecal microbiome and not the intestinal microbiome, but we hope there's a strong enough correlation that we can make those deductions there. Yeah.
That is so interesting.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and the students seem to enjoy that. But to get back to your question in terms of what's going on with that, The field is still new enough where I don't think we really have a good grasp of what the perfect or really good microbiome is supposed to look like, because a lot of it is cultural. Somebody who is a vegetarian is going to have a really different microbiome than somebody who is an omnivore, or what I used to call a meatitarian, somebody who eats, sausages and steaks and whatnot on a regular basis. But then, if we go to a different culture entirely, not only do the food items we ingest change, but also the spices, right?
Right.
And so that may have an impact as well with somebody who has lots of milk product. And so that's what I'm saying in terms of, I don't even know if a healthy microbiome among people in this country can even be defined, because we are in a country of so many different cultures, and each culture likely has a slightly different microbiome. So it's going to take us a while to tease that out. We do know which microbes are really bad for us, and we try to avoid those.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Do we know what's bad? Do we know what's definitely unhealthy?
Yes, we do know those, because, obviously they're the ones that give us a lot of problems in terms of pick the worst E. coli, the ones that actually send people to the hospital, or pick whatever kind of microbes you have, right? We all have E. coli in our systems, but having the wrong kind may actually send you to the hospital. So we do know those. So I think we know what a bad microbiome looks like. We just don't really know what a good one is for you. And your microbiome might not be good for me.
Is there a way an individual can tell if their microbiome is actually reasonably good for them?
I guess in a way, because if you're having intestinal issues on a regular basis, and
You
part
would
it
know.
might be because your microbiome is unbalanced. Right?
But then it's really hard to get a balance because nobody really knows what a balanced one looks like.
True, but at the same time, I think by eating foods that sit well with us is sort of already sort of a very good indicator that it might be helpful for you.
Trusting your
If
gut,
somebody constantly
essentially.
has GI issues, in addition to maybe some inflammation going on, there might even be a balance in the microbiome. Now, the microbiome changes over time. We do know that a microbiome in an infant looks very different than what in an old person. So that's what I'm saying. So it's really difficult to say that if you look at your microbiome today, Anna, in 10 years from now, it's going to look different. But is it worse? You don't know that yet.
It's not good, it's not bad, it's just different.
Yeah, it's just different right now. And then certain types of diseases and certain types of conditions have an effect directly on the microbiome as well. But we don't know, for example, right now, if some of the conditions are because of microbiome change and that had a feedback, or is it that the condition had an impact on the microbiome? So those are the things that the field is trying to figure out. And mind you, I'm not a specialist in microbiomes. This is sort of something I'm doing really on the side. And there are much more qualified people to talk to about microbiome and the specialties and the signaling, all that's involved there. But I don't know just enough to be dangerous. But it's a lot of fun.
So interesting. You came to the United States as a grown-up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how was it, the immigration experience?
So it's probably a little bit different in part because I do have family in the US. They're on the West Coast, but I do have family here. And it was certainly not. So when I came here in the 1990s, this was not the first time I'd been to the country. I've been here many times, probably since the 70s. And so the language was not a barrier. I knew the country. What was different for me, though, is the transition to the South. So Charleston, South Carolina, or South Carolina in itself, is a very different piece of America than I'd ever experienced. I've been to Oregon and Washington State and California. I had not been to the East Coast, and I'd never been to South Carolina or the South itself. And so I think that transition was more difficult.
Why?
Because, well, at least in the 90s, and mind you, I haven't been back a whole lot since, the gender roles were much more defined. Even though I found what they call the Southern Bells and sort of the whole concept, I find it endearing. That was not the way I was raised. In Germany, women are raised or were raised very independent, very free thinking, very maybe more headstrong than what I saw in South Carolina at the time. Now, mind you, I stayed in South Carolina for almost 20 years, so it's not like I was just in the 90s. But I think it was a different environment than I had expected.
Can you give a couple of examples, maybe, like where it really struck you?
Yeah, so one of my friend's roommates turned 21 and had a major meltdown because she was neither engaged nor married already.
Mm.
And I could not fathom that somebody at that young age felt that internal pressure to define themselves as the wife of somebody rather than going through the education process, rather than developing their own personality. So this was sort of I always found it almost like a codependency. So it was really sort of that if this particular person and her friends circle define themselves as the girlfriend or the wife or the fiancée of somebody else. And it really sort of that status was much more important than self-development.
Did you have problems finding a relationship, finding the right person who would understand you?
Not necessarily, no. And I think in part it's because I tended to hang out with people also maybe who were not necessarily of that mindset or maybe even had traveled. And I think one of the big differences is that the people that initially I had not problems with, but sort of were challenging to relate to in the beginning, were the ones who were born and raised in that area, had never left that area. And so their mindset was very different. Their worldview was very different because this is the only thing they've ever seen. And some of them were interestingly never wanted to leave either. Carolina is a great state, and I didn't want to even, maybe they wanted to go to North Carolina, but that's about as far as they went. Right. And so that to me, of course, coming from a different country, from a different continent, was just unfathomable. I mean, how would you not want to explore this beautiful world and see everything around and go to Russia, go to Germany, go to France, go to South America, go to all these different places? And so that mindset was just very different.
Yeah, because Medical University of South Carolina, right, MUSC, is a pretty multicultural place, right? And Charleston is a
Yes,
pretty
right.
multicultural
And
city.
so once I was there, exactly right. So I was surrounded, it was almost an international island in a sea of maybe less international composition. Yeah. And so not just at the university there, but also in other places. I think I just found like-minded people. And some were South Carolinians, but many of them were maybe raised somewhere else and had moved to South Carolina for whatever reason at the time. Met you there.
Right. I
Yeah.
was waiting tables at the restaurant on the work and travel program.
Yep.
Yeah. I enjoyed it. It was fun.
I was going to say, you were asking about other challenges. I think one of the biggest challenges for me, even though my English was good enough to get around and clearly good enough to get a job and everything else there as well, I don't know, have you noticed how different idioms and puns are
Oh, yeah.
in a language other than your own?
I mean, the bless your heart thing.
Or just something as simple as, so I was developing a birding program. It was a bird watching program, right? So with binoculars and everything. And one of my colleagues was trying to make a pun. I didn't even know what a pun was, but a pun, right? You know, so basically something funny with words. And so the funny story with that one is, so you have the German expression about two flies with a fly swatter. You have the English expression of killing two birds with one stone. And doing a bird protection program where I was trying to go out into the park and say, we're going to watch these birds and see what's going on. And then somebody says, we're going to kill two birds with one stone. And I was justifying the program. And I was basically going on for about 5 minutes, and there was this quiet in the room. And then the entire management level starts cracking up and laughing. At that time, I don't know if you remember that, there was a TV show on called Third Rock from the Sun.
I
No?
was not into TV shows now.
Well, it's a bunch of aliens that come
Okay.
to Earth.
Okay.
And they basically told me that I'm like one of the characters on Third Rock on the Sun because in absence of truly understanding the idiom, I will take things literally.
Literally, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's what we do, right? The phrase, get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
The first time I heard that, I was pretty offended
Right.
because I thought I was supposed to leave, right? Because it didn't compute that this might actually be a phrase that is commonly used for something that's hysterical, that's funny. I don't believe you.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it happens a lot when you learn when you learn another language, pretty much like in classical way, right? But you read
Yes.
books and you study dialogues, right? But you don't watch a lot of shows,
No.
right? You don't hang out with the people. Yeah, it happens a lot, of course.
Yeah.
I remember I got in trouble once because I thought that the word "you're supposed to," the expression "you're supposed to," comes from the word "suppose," and it's not mandatory. It's like, suppose this, that, sort of. And I was never a rule breaker, right? I never meant to break any rules, but I did not quite understand that whatever I was told was actually mandatory. Yeah, it happens.
It happens a lot, right? And so I think
Yeah.
I try to be a little bit more cognizant of that even now because many of our students at my university are international or
Hmm.
are immigrants or are first generation students, but they speak their original language at home. And so I try to be cognizant of that, but it's still tricky because now you have somebody whose English is not first language trying to explain to
Hmm.
somebody else who comes from a different culture, explain that as well. It's really
Right.
quite challenging sometimes.
And I think it's even worse when you are pretty good at speaking English, right? Your skills are really good. And you don't walk around with that dazed and confused expression. So people don't necessarily recognize when you don't recognize something.
Yes,
Right? Yeah.
yes,
It's, yeah, you can get in trouble with that.
a lot.
Hmm. All right. What else was difficult when you just moved, like first 2 or 3 years? What about, did you encounter maybe issues with foods that you did not necessarily know how much you should or should not be eating? Because I remember I had a lot of those problems.
Yes, so I think that happens to me though almost anywhere I travel, and you may have the same
Mhm.
experience. Anytime I go to a new culture, it takes my digestion system about a couple of days to even adjust, just from a biological perspective, right?
Right, right.
But at the same time, yes, you're right. So going to a grocery store and all of a sudden having a different food selection, and I'm looking at some of the things and I go, why are they packaged this way? Why is it this way? And what the heck is a fried green tomato, right?
Tastes
So
good.
right. Um, why does all the butter have salt in it? On the other hand, some of the items that I was looking for didn't exist back in the 90s. Now they're actually coming in. So there are a whole lot more German foods now and a whole lot more Japanese foods now than I've ever seen before. And I think especially in our area on the East Coast, and I'm sure the same is true for where you live, we have maybe not a Chinatown, but we have concentrated areas where there are lots of Koreans or lots of Japanese or lots of other kind of Asians, Indians, and so on. And all of a sudden the supermarkets stock more accordingly.
Yeah.
I think it's wonderful that we have an influx of Hispanic communities at this point because the food selection all of a sudden became a whole lot more interesting in our grocery stores, and I love it. But so I think initially, though, you're right, it was a big transition, especially since coming from Germany, we didn't go out quite as often, I think, as people do here in terms of fast food and all that. So I was used to cooking a whole lot more at home and inviting people to come over for a home cooked meal rather than going out to restaurants. And also, and I don't know how it's in Russia, but in Germany, when we go out to a restaurant, it's like a 2 or 3 hour affair. By the time you sit down and you finally get the menu, you order your appetizers, you order maybe a beverage of some sort, then you get your main. I mean, it's a 2 or 3 hour ordeal. Whereas here, I feel a little bit more rushed, right? And everything goes a little bit faster. The food comes out faster, which I'm assuming is because it's probably partially prepared. But then also, as soon as we're done with the dessert, blah, the check is in front of you.
Get out of here.
Get out of here. You need
Get
to
out of
turn
here.
over the
In
table.
the real sense, get out of here, right?
Yes, get
Actually,
out
get
of here.
out of
Yes,
here.
leave. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that's different. It's just a different attitude towards food altogether. It's not so much that the food itself is strange and different, even though some of the dishes are.
Hmm.
Yeah,
It's really eating on the go, right? Just
a lot
grabbing
more eating
things.
on the go. Well,
Yeah.
yeah,
In Russia, I did not go out to the restaurants. Well, I remember two instances of going out to eat with my family, literally two in all the time that I was growing up there. We always ate at home. It was just not a thing, at least
yeah,
for my family at all.
it's different.
And even though some teenagers started to like go out for pizza, grabbing things here and there, I never did. It was
Yeah.
just sort of, yeah, no, get home and eat at home, and that was it.
So I recognize that, of course, nowadays we can also get pizza delivered in Germany. It's not like it doesn't exist. And especially during COVID, it really became popular, right? But I don't think Uber Eats exists, or Uber in itself, I don't think even exists in Germany. If it does, I just haven't seen it. Right? So there's, yeah, lots of different businesses that never really took off there.
Hmm. And so, so you are half German and half Japanese, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your mom is Japanese. Okay. So how was it, I guess, being so multicultural and coming to South Carolina as half German, half Japanese? Did you encounter any like weird stares, weird questions, any weird reactions?
So, yes and no. Charleston, South Carolina has a pretty large Filipino community.
Mm-hmm.
And so many people, I think, assumed that I belonged to that community, which wasn't really, I mean, I don't speak that language at all. On the other hand, also, and I don't know if that makes any sense, but apparently I look a little bit like I could be from the country Colombia. I had
Hmm.
quite a few, and I still do, quite a few people talk to me in Spanish.
Interesting.
I don't speak Spanish.
Right.
Right. And so I might get stares because they're trying, because I think the natural human tendency is to categorize people. It's that you fit into this category. I don't need to fit into any category. And so the closest category somebody can think of might be either the Hispanic community or the Korean or the Filipino community, neither one of which is true. I think the place where I blended in the most was actually Hawaii, because there are quite a few half Japanese people here, and the Hapas, they have Hawaiian, half white community, kind of looks like me, I suppose. But yeah, in South Carolina, it was different. And especially once I start opening my mouth and the language that comes out, I had probably a slightly stronger German accent back then still. It didn't compute. And so there were lots of questions as to who are you? Where are you from? And I still get the question now, but it's interesting in academia when somebody asks me, where am I from? A lot of times they ask, where did I do my PhD or where did I do my postdoc, right? And so I always have to ask, why are you asking? Are you asking because you detect a different accent? Because you can't categorize me? Or you try and ask, are you asking about my education? And it's just interesting because that question is really loaded, right? So if somebody asks you where you're from, do you say, I'm from California? You say I'm from right because we don't I don't understand the question.
It's complicated.
Complicated.
Yeah.
Yes.
I forgot to
Yeah.
ask you, do you want to be addressed as doctor?
Not really, no. To me
Okay.
that's a work title, right?
Right.
So in my
Okay, that's good.
field, I have to admit, so with my students, I insist on that. In
Hmm.
part because it's interesting enough, so many of our students, regardless of what gender they are, they will address the men as Dr. So and so, and the women
Hmm.
quite often as Mrs.
Interesting.
And for that reason, when it comes to my students, I say, no, 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 no. I have the same education as my male colleagues, and let's address everybody by their real title. And so it's either Professor Tsuji or Dr. Tsuji is fine. The other part too is I have learned the hard way, unfortunately, that if I tell my students to call me by my first name, they think we're friends. And that's not really the case because I still often need to give them a grade or need to be their mentor, need to help them and sometimes draw the boundaries and say this is where you go and this is where you can't go. And I feel that by giving them a first name or letting them address me by my first name blurs that boundary right there. And so that becomes difficult. But no, among colleagues or anybody else, I even tell students, if you're not my own student, I'm perfectly fine with whatever you want to call me.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, a little bit of formality and boundaries is actually a good thing and keeps the
Mm-hmm.
relationships healthy. Because I
Yeah,
see the very similar thing when I practice law, because I encounter so many people in the worst times of their lives, or at least
sure.
extremely stressful. And you really want to make sure that they don't see you as their pal and they communicate with you as
Yeah.
their lawyer and not just their therapist, for example. Yeah,
Yes.
and those little formal things, they do help to accomplish this. Is there anything else that you would insist on with your students to maintain those healthy boundaries? For example, I would say when I went to school in Russia, high school. I don't mean university, high school. University was a little bit more informal, I guess. Students were expected to stand up when a teacher walks into the classroom. Right. So I don't mean to that degree, but like, do you have to correct the students' writing style, for example?
It has gotten interesting in the last 5 to 10 years with the onset of COVID, but then also everybody now has a cell phone, right? It doesn't matter who you are, you're going to have a cell phone of some sort. And a lot of times what students are doing is they're texting us rather than sending professional email. And I sometimes have to remind them that whenever they send it to my email account, it is a actually permanent record of the communication. And so does it have to be grammatically perfect? No. But it probably should have my name and their name on there somewhere and not just
Hey,
launching into something. There should be, and again, it doesn't have to be, Dear Dr. Tsuji, how are you today? I'm well. None of that is necessary. But Dr. Tsuji, this is what I want. Signing off with student name is really helpful so we know who they are. Am I the intended? Because if they copy multiple people on there and just say hello or nothing, I go, who are you talking to? Am I just copied on this? Or actually trying to talk to me, right? And so I think a lot of that actually happens these days, sort of not correcting, but guiding them and helping them to understand that this level of communication is probably a lot more formal than they used to. And I think that's part of because maybe in high school they didn't learn that. They didn't have that. Maybe it wasn't enforced. But at a university level, I mean, all of a sudden they say, well, this is what I need, or I can't come to class, or blah, 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 blah. There needs to be a little bit more in terms of guidelines.
at least clear, right? Not even
Yeah.
formal, but clear. It's more
Mm-hmm.
about clarity because it's obvious to you you're writing, but it's not obvious to the person on the other side.
Correct. Yeah, communication is difficult to begin with, but I think the students don't have as much practice with that. And so it takes them typically about a year or two to get there.
I see. And also, probably it's that our society is kind of in between this formal and also very informal. And some teachers and some professors, they actually want the informal format, right? And every students have to figure out, depending on which professor they're working with, like what it
Sure.
is. But the default probably should be more clear and just slightly more on the formal side.
Well, it's
Yeah.
probably the safer option. I mean, because
Right.
I mean,
Right.
somebody who is okay with informal can always say,
Yeah.
you don't have to do any of this.
Call
But
me
it's
by my first name. Mhm.
right, but it's going to be a little bit more difficult to come back from the not not so proper email. And then the other part too is a lot of students seem to think we're counselors because that's what they're used to also from high school,
Hmm.
right? Where they have high school counselors. And so when we have academic advising sessions, I'm not a trained counselor. I don't have a degree in psychology. So this is not just not my job, but it's also beyond my level of expertise. Difficult sometimes for me to let them understand that this is not something I can help you deal with, but here are the resources. Let me get you to the counseling center. Let me get you to the student support center. Let me get you to somebody who can actually help you navigate your situation. I can't fix many other things that they're dealing with, unfortunately.
Interesting. I don't remember that being a common thing when I went to school here, at least not in law school. I don't think we were going to our professors with psychological problems. Like you would go to the office of some academic of the advisors who could, like you said, point you towards the resources.
Right.
But no, you would not be discussing something like that with your professor when you're talking about the course.
Well, our students deal with a lot of issues that personally I didn't have to deal with either, right? So many of the issues that we have with our student population these days is they're either from low income situations, first generation students. Nobody in the family has ever had a college degree before, so they don't know how to navigate any of that. Many of them are caregivers, either because they have an ailing parent, they have small siblings at home, or might even have their own children. Some of them are single parents. Many of them come from maybe different cultures where some of the interactions are just counter to what they have experienced before.
Right.
And so it's a challenge. And of course they seek help, which is great. But some of the help, of course, is beyond what I can do as an academic advisor or even as a chair, right? Try to get them to the right people so they can get that help. But a lot of times it's really challenging because I sometimes wonder how it happened that especially in this country, in America, that everybody is just automatically going to college without giving really some thought into, is this really the best thing for them at this time?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not doubting that anyone can actually go to college and be successful. What I'm questioning sometimes is that person maybe, would it benefit to maybe wait a year or two to get a clear picture of what they want to do and get some of those critical skills, like being able to read and comprehend and sort of figure out, or maybe work a little bit, save some money, or maybe deal with some of the issues that are affecting their ability to really devote 20 to 30 to 40 hours a week to college, right? I mean, this is a full-time job. You know that, and you didn't just go to class, go home, and be done and go hang out at the pool. I'm sure you studied your butt off, right?
Oh, hell yeah.
Right. But imagine for a second you have 2 or 3 small children at home at the time. So when you come home, there is no ability to relax or study. You have to take care of whatever else is going on in your situation. But that's not something I can fix. And so I'm wondering sometimes if students are just being pushed into, let's just go to university right away without really giving some thought into, is this really the best idea at this time?
Mhm. And do you see students usually coming soon after school, or you see people who are much older?
Most of the students we have are coming straight from high school or community college, right? So some students go to a community college first and then make the jump to a four-year university like ours. We do have some what we call more mature or adult students, but that's still a much smaller population than the typical incoming freshman is.
Would the more mature students be better at navigating the school process and being in the place to go to school? Would you say?
Quite often they are, because they are so determined.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They are so determined to make this work and to make this happen because they have typically not the ability to get the student loans that sometimes freshmen are eligible for, so they pay out of pocket. And so this is all really hitting home. Whereas the typical freshman coming in, if they get federal student loans, they don't necessarily maybe feel the immediate impact, but at the same time, because they have not experienced the workforce, they haven't experienced anything but high school, and so they're coming to college. And I think many of the students think that's the same thing, just more. And it's actually a very different environment. It's a very different expectation in terms of being independent and being able to all of a sudden manage your time on your own. You don't get told immediately anymore, this is what you have to do. They tell you, this is the goal. You need to get there. It's a challenge. Like I said, I have no doubt that any and all of our students are capable of doing it. I just wonder sometimes if the timing could be adjusted just so they have a bit more support before they actually
Right.
try this.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I can kind of see where it's coming from, right? With so many employers expecting a college degree, but
Mm-hmm.
also so many employers expecting a college degree because it gives a little bit more, I guess, guarantee that the person is at least good at reading, and understanding basic instructions and maybe managing their time, right? Whereas if you're getting somebody with just high school, you could get someone who does not have any of those skills, right? And these skills are essential. I can see why the employers want that, but also I can see how it's a really bad impact on the students. So, you mentioned a couple times already where you went for an opportunity that might not have felt very organic right away, but nevertheless you transitioned, you made that step, that leap, and you ended up in a good place, right? So, what is it in your life and your life philosophy that got you to take that leap? Like, where is this coming from, as opposed to being, oh, I'd rather just sit back and be safe where I am.
I'm pretty persistent, which I think is sort of something that anybody who has been to graduate school ever knows what that means. Like this whole perseverance, as in there's something, I want it, let's go get it. And let's actually work really, really hard. The other part, of course, is discipline. And those sort of, this is again, anybody who's either been in the military or is an athlete or has been to graduate school, we all know that it takes a certain amount of discipline to actually get us there. But in order to sort of adapt to new situations and maybe to actually enjoy exploring, I think I'm just inherently curious. And I think that's one of the reasons why also when I realized that maybe marine biology wasn't going to work out because I didn't get to do what I really wanted to do in that aspect because of the diesel fumes and whatnot, it didn't really break me. It was just sort of so I'm going to have to find and tweak it a little bit differently and find something else and approach it from a different level. And I'm having fun doing it. The other part is I think I'm inherently optimistic that somehow things are going to work out. I'm not saying that I'm not a realist. I'm actually usually the one who says, well, if this goes wrong or this could happen, I guess we'll have to figure out something else. But I think the attitude of just approaching life as good overall, also that seeing people are inherently good and that they're willing to help one another. And I think the ability for me to reach out and find friends like you and others who then can help support me in my endeavors, that probably has gotten me farther than any sort of one thing.
Being open and optimistic.
Being open, being curious, and being able to find the right support group at any given time.
Do you think any of that came from your family? Was that the attitude when you were growing up?
I think my mother probably had something to do with that, yes. I mean, so my mother coming from Japan to Germany also had to figure out her support group. And so I think observing her do that probably had a big influence on me, yes. The whole curiosity thing, I don't know if that is something that I observed anywhere, but I think just being in a natural science field and being outdoors a whole lot just helps being observant and being curious and being interested in what's going on around you.
Do you have any personality traits that are a hindrance to you that you would rather not have, that you have to keep working on, maybe getting rid of?
Probably. My discipline is not quite as strong anymore as it used to in some aspects. So in terms of working out and exercising, I think I could do a little bit more. The other part is that sometimes I talk too quickly before thinking it through. And I think that's part of being an extrovert when it comes to thinking through processes. Whereas an introvert is going to take maybe a day or two and then deliver with perfect cadence and perfect words, everything. I think things through by writing out and by talking about it. And I think a lot of times it will probably help me to maybe distill my thoughts first for a few minutes before just opening mouth and blurting them out. I don't know if that's a personality trait or just being an extrovert a little bit more than an introvert.
Maybe it's being direct and headstrong and just saying what you think.
Probably goes with it, yes. But maybe I can listen a bit more intentionally before actually providing any kind of feedback. So maybe that's something I can work on.
Okay. Any kind of advice for younger people starting out, maybe hoping for a career path like yours?
Find a support network. Find people who can help you. Ask questions. And don't give up.
Don't give up.
Don't give up.
It's worth it.
Yeah, it's worth it. But find out whether that's really something you truly want. Because one thing that I see a lot of times is that students will get enamored with an idea. Many of the students that come to me are actually in the pre-med sort of area. They would like to become a physician, like become an oncologist or a pediatrician or something like that. And I sometimes wonder if they like the idea of being a medical professional more than actually the path to get there. Because when I then ask them, so are you ready for chemistry and anatomy and physiology? And I say, well, I'll do that so I can become a medical professional. I said, well, if you don't enjoy the way of getting there, what makes you think you'll actually like being in that field? Being honest with oneself, I think, in terms of, is this really something I truly want? But then once you find out what you really want, then go for it and give it a try. And I don't think you probably know. So I didn't tell you every single thing I've ever done, right? There's a couple of other degrees still in there, and there's a couple of other side hustles in there that I've done. But we are allowed to change our minds, right? So I started out in law school, switched completely to biology, switched again to marine biology. No, I did finish all those degrees, so it's not like I just gave up. But at the same time, we're not stuck in this. Now, it did take me a lot longer to get to where I am today than maybe somebody else. So by the time I got hired at my university, one of my colleagues who got hired at the same time, they're almost 10 years younger than I am, because they figured out much more quickly early on what they wanted to do and pursue that track. But a career path is not a pipeline. It's not a straight sort of one road for everybody and one path fits all. Are you familiar with what we call a braided river? Unlike a canal, which is a river that is dammed by two concrete walls that goes in one direction only, right? A typical pipeline. A career path that sort of has a braided river, imagine sort of as in multiple streams of water that go in, that go out, and some will get diverted. But there are many different ways to get to the same career path or get to the same career goal. It doesn't have to be, you have to do this, and this is the next step, and this is the next step. So if you look at my path, it went all sorts of ways and meandered and went outside for a while and stopped for a while and came back in and did something different. So I think the students who are set on a certain career goal sometimes forget that there are many different ways to get there. And if one way doesn't work, they keep hitting that same wall over and over again instead of just saying, how about stepping around that wall and try it from a different angle? That's sort of my innate curiosity in terms of I'm not dead set on one particular thing, one particular goal. But once I know what the goal is, I try to go get it. But if I don't get it straight on, I'll sidestep. I'll flank. I'll come from the other side and see how I can do that. And I think if our students and our younger generation can sort of internalize that there's not just one way to get there, that's huge.
Being flexible,
Yeah.
definitely.
I mean, look at you. You didn't think in the beginning you want to get to where you are today.
Nope,
You went all
I did
sorts
not
of
at all.
way around and from different angles until you made it and are now running your own company, basically, right?
Yes, pretty much. And it's I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was not something that I knew from the get-go that, hey, I wanted to be there. Not really. Okay, well, great. Look, thank you for the interview. It was really interesting. I enjoyed talking to you. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you. It was great fun and great seeing you again, Anna.